move on to live independently. The journey that they take with us hopefully improves their employment skills and moves them towards the future of getting a job and that ability to be independent. All those sorts of things, it seems to me, resonate with the kind of characteristics that we've heard tonight about Housing First. We would love to work with Housing First to be able to extend the scope of the people that we work with. We're a very small organisation. We've got brand new accommodation right next to the Seaforth and Liverpool station for those of you who go north towards Formby and Southport on the City line. When the trees have lost the leaves, you'll see our accommodation when the train is parked in the station. It's right on the left-hand side. We would love to work with a wider group of homeless people who've got more serious needs. We can't do that at the moment, and I would love to have a conversation with Housing First to see whether we can widen the scope and work with people with greater needs through that joint work and cooperation.
Starting from a point of absolute belief in Housing First, we come from a perspective that nobody chooses to be homeless, and therefore actually, both as an organisation but also as individuals, what we've got to do is actually prevent homelessness wherever we can, and Housing First seems perhaps the most sensible way of actually moving that forward, recognising that housing is a right, and actually we've got to invest in people and invest in services. I suppose the idea, therefore, of non-time-bound support, flexible support services, services that wrap around the person, anything that could actually enable people to move forward into their own independent accommodation has to be the right way forward. As an organisation and working here in Liverpool, I suppose we've seen homelessness increase over the last decade. In 2011, we worked with 1,800 people here in the region. Last year, it's 4,323. And actually, unless we do something different, we're never actually going to stop homelessness. Having said I'm an absolute supporter of Housing First, I suppose there's a few cautionary notes in terms of how to actually take it forward. Just heard in terms of the actual scale of homelessness, I suppose that's one of the issues. But I suppose the other issues that go with it is in terms of making sure that it's inclusive to all. Here in Liverpool, one of the things that we work with is a growing number of people with no recourse to public funds. So people here in Liverpool and in the country perfectly legally, but because of their rights and their access to welfare benefits, don't actually have the same choice. In terms of the night shelter, in terms of Library House, 30% of the people that stay there every single night have no recourse to public funds. Affordability, therefore, is going to be an issue. It doesn't matter whether it's independent accommodation or supported accommodation. Actually, you've got people without that recourse, and therefore, how do you take that forward? So Housing First has got to be within a system that actually changes that. We've actually got to look wider than just the housing, just the support. We've got to change the legislation that goes with it. I suppose secondly, it's about actually the housing supply. Housing First is actually looking at working within the current pilot with those that are most complex and the most in need. And that's absolutely right as a starting point. But I suppose as a city, we also want to recognise everybody should have that choice, everybody should have that option. And the way to do that is actually having a housing-led system. And therefore, we want to make sure we don't have a two-tier system. We need affordable, accessible housing for all. I suppose alongside that, we also need to think about the types of accommodation. It's not just about it being affordable. One of the things that homelessness does is impact on people's health, and particularly around people's physical health. The volume of people that you'll see on the streets at the moment that are in wheelchairs, the volume of people that you'll see who've actually got physical disabilities. We need adapted properties, and therefore we've got to not just invest in housing, we've got to invest in actually the right accommodation in the right place that's also really, truly accessible for people. Finally, it's about actually that long-term nature of the support. One of the things that we're very good at in the UK seems to be pilot services. We've got a homelessness strategy that seeks to end rough-sleeping by 2027, but it's based on pilot programs with pilot funding. It all seems to be 12 months, 3 years. Actually, Housing First demonstrates it's the longevity of the support that actually equals the change. If you don't invest in it, you don't actually get anywhere. So we've got to change that. We've also got to make sure the other services are actually accessible. So we talk about the need for treatment, we talk about the need for mental health services. Homelessness itself isn't a need. Homelessness is a result of a lack of access to the right services. So unless we invest in the right treatment, not just a methadone program, but actually a real treatment service that's therapeutic, we won't actually get what we need. So Housing First is actually the right approach, but we've got to have the other things that go with it.
Oops, thank you very much, David. Nigel and John. So that's fantastic. Before I come to you, I'm just going to ask you who's got questions, but Engage has a gender policy. So every time a man asks a question, the next questioner will be a woman. Okay, so that's how we operate. So the first hand up is a woman, so we'll go straight to the first question. Can you just tell us when you're asking a question, just your first name, and then ask the question, and keep it brief, and then we can get as many people in as possible.
Why haven't we heard of this in the last 3 years? What have we been doing? It's the community that's going to make the difference. You're making plans. One word you used, collaboration. And the other thing I'd like to say is, can he be our leader?
Okay. Okay, thank you. We'll take another question, because that was a passionate sentence. Thank you very much.
Thanks, my name's Steve, and just two queries. What I've got is, I had a 15-year background of working in services, and as support workers were put under a lot of stress, and there was a lot of unnecessary paperwork, so support workers were tied down. That's got to change to make this work. And the second is, a lot of the big national charities get a lot of the funding when a load of the grassroots charities do fantastic works in the city, the voluntary run ones, and they need to be included more from a grassroots level. So that's the concerns that I've got, whether the support workers won't be stressed out and be able to do the job, supporting people, not filling in forms and then meeting targets, and there's more local services brought in.
Excellent. Would somebody like to have a go at that, or just make a comment? John?
I totally agree with what Steve's saying. I've been a support worker in the past, and it is very demanding. You spend more time filling paperwork in than you do actually with the clients. So yeah, I agree with what you're saying, Steve.
David, do you want to say something? No? Trish, I think probably a question for the City Region support workers. I know we've got some staff. Shall I ask? Kate, would you like to? Do you want to say something?
Yeah. You know, I'm very passionate. You know, we've got a crisis about all of our support workers. So if we look, for example, in adult services and children's services, the caseworks that social workers have got in those areas has grown exponentially over the last few years as well. And we know that that can lead to kind of like burnout. It can lead to people leaving the service because it feels that it's too difficult, or they just generally themselves will get unwell because they take on all of the burdens. I'm very aware of that. I think we all are very aware of that. So actually protecting the physical and the mental health of all of our staff that work for us is something that we're really looking at within the body of this pilot, and that's why we're trying to keep, you know, the casework for people, the numbers of cases that people will have at any one time, quite limited, and that's why the pilot is you know, in some ways quite restricted because of that, because we don't want to overburden either the system, the access to housing, but also to those individuals that are providing that support as well. And I just kind of like take back about your point about national charities, and I absolutely understand that. So in Sefton, for example, our homelessness services are mostly commissioned out to local VCF sectors, and they deliver for us at a local level. So I think that's critical, because I think when you've got organisations that are absolutely vested in your community, they know your clientele, they know the service offer, and actually, they've, you know, in my experience, they'll go the extra mile for you as well in terms of making the connections happen for people as and when they need them. So I'm always, in my elected member role, I'm always about kind of like commissioning to the lowest level we can.
That was a man asking a question, so I'm sorry, you're going to have to wait. A lady first, and I'll come back to you. Another woman, right to the back. Can you just tell us your name first, your first name?
Thanks. Hi, my name's Alex. I've been working in homelessness for some time, and I know David and Trish made some what I think are really valid points on the importance of other services and the challenges around rehabilitation services and the pressures on mental health systems. And I was just wondering how you think that we could address those challenges within Housing First, because they're really key to sustaining people in accommodation.
Thank you. Trish, do you want to have another go at that one, or you are?
It's fundamental, isn't it? Because actually, if we don't give people an opportunity to, if they want to take those opportunities to actually break some of the cycles that they're in, then they're going to not be able to break the cycle of housing accommodation that they're in as well. So it's fundamental to me. Some of this is beyond the pilot. We're lucky that we've got this £7.3 million, but we've, targeted for that over a 3-year period. We keep making the case to government, really, and this is where the broader devolution agenda comes in, about other services that we think should be devolved to the local, to the city region, because we know where the money needs to be and how it should be spent. So the kind of this is an example for a broader argument for us about how devolution should work, because some of those top-down services don't work at a local level, and the money gets so diluted when it comes to each locality, it's increasingly difficult to do things.
Yeah, I think that the easy answer would be always money. That's how it goes. But like I said previously, at the end of the day, when you really put the effort and money also in the mental health services and other services around the Housing First, you're still going to save money at the end of the day when you do it in a long-term plans. So don't be afraid to use the money at this point, because you're going to get it back at some time. But I know it's hard because the financial times in Europe, they are not very well, and of course you guys have to deal with the Brexit and everything that comes with it, so it's easy for me to come to say that, hey, you spend more money, but I think that is not the only way, but the good way to really make sure that people don't have to wait 6 months to get into the services. Yeah. But.
And David, did you want to make a comment?
I think it's using it as the platform to actually make those changes. If we don't, we'll actually be in the same position. Housing First doesn't work unless you actually have the wraparound support, the wraparound services that can actually make the difference. So I think it's actually, if you're making the mindset change to actually look at Housing First, then it has to go with it. If you don't invest in it, you've already failed.
Can I just add that I don't think in this country we're very good at all at investing to save. There was a government initiative to that effect some years ago, which was interestingly abandoned. We don't have that, and our political system doesn't support it either. Governments are elected now forcibly, is it, for 5 years. The whole political process is very short term, so that, and a lot of these things we're talking about, if you take, for example, something that's fairly close to my heart, the criminal justice system, you couldn't invent something that was so counterproductive to dealing with reoffending and trying to help people to rehabilitate. You couldn't have a worse system than the one we've got. And we just dismantled the only part of it that did anything, the probation service. So, we're not good at doing what you've done in Finland, to spend money on the basis that in the future it will pay back and save. And that's in a way, a very narrow financial basis on which to put any argument forward. It's a good one, but it's not the only one. We ought to be doing it because it's good for the people themselves who are in the situation that they're in.
Exactly. Absolutely. It's good about the people's lives, isn't it? And we miss that completely. Question here, and then it's a woman next.
Yeah. Hello, I'm Aaron. My question's for, is it Juha, your name? Yeah. So in Finland, with your Housing First system, I'd be interested to know, just out of curiosity and also my heart, is I was a man of 23-year drug addiction, 4-year homelessness. I would be interested to hear how many of your people you house are in active addiction, and is there a success rate by the system you have in place? And also, how you find that you helped them rehabilitate to get clean? What was the system and the support in place for that?
Great question. Thanks very much, Aaron.
I don't have the exact numbers how many people have addiction rate, but I would say something like 25 to 80%. I think that's pretty accurate. And the success rate for people coming to housing first in Finland, it's 90%. So 9 out of 10 people, they are still living in their own apartment after 2 years. And after that, the one people, if they lose the apartment, they don't end up homelessness again. We find another solution for them in the system. So for example, if they live in a scattered housing, they get evicted for a reason or another, they can go to a supported housing unit where they're supported 24/7 if needed. So they can rely on that so they don't end up in the streets back again. And of course, we try to do what comes to addictions, that we also do the harm reduction. So if people are not willing to have any help for the addiction, at least we give the clean needles, stuff like that, so at least it's safe to use the drugs in your apartment or whatever you are using. So I think that's the one thing that we are doing.
Okay. A woman for the next question. Oh, I'll take you, then Daniel, and then you.
Hello, my name's Sarah. I'm just really interested in finding out a bit more information, but who are the we? So when we talk about what we are trying to do in devolution, who is that group? Who do they consist of? Where do they work? What organisations do they represent? Really interesting to get that. Who's round the table?
Who is the we?
So the City Region is the 6 local authorities that combine together. So that's Liverpool, Sefton, the Wirral, Knowsley. Yeah, so it's actually quite a complicated arrangement that we've got in terms of governance, because we wanted to make sure that it wasn't just Kate sitting in a corner kind of like trying to work it out. So at the moment we've got a number of steering groups that actually oversee the work of Housing First, and there's a number of subgroups in there. So for example, most of the housing providers that operate, big housing providers in the City Region, are part of the subgroup that work with us around that. And then we've got some of the support services in a different set of working groups as well. So, and all of that comes together. So, I mean, there's a slide that we could share on that, and I'm sure Kate might be able to give a little bit more insight on that. But yeah, it's almost, the question is who isn't, I think, is probably a little bit more appropriate in that sense.
Kate, do you want to add to that? The week? Can I just give you the microphone?
Thank you. So, I'm Kate Farrell from the Liverpool City Region. As Councillor Hardy said, we've got a steering group that oversees this pilot, and that involves people from all the local authorities, as well as people with their own lived experience of homelessness who are sat at that table and helping us make the right decisions. There is staff who are working on the pilot, but there are also representatives from the voluntary sector through the V6 group. There are representatives of housing providers, representatives of criminal justice, physical and mental health organisations. So we are taking a really collaborative approach, because this is a whole system change. And so we have to have those people around the table. As you're aware, it's a very small pilot. We're in phase 1 of a pilot at the moment. That will expand, and as it expands, there will be more people invited around that table. As we're delivering more and more services, we need to collaborate. But there are subgroups underneath that of specialist providers, but there is a really kind of multifaceted steering group leading this work. There's a huge amount of scrutiny on what we're doing, rightly so, to make sure that we're getting it right for the City Region.
Thank you. Does that answer your question? It sounded simple, who are we? But there's a lot of answers to that. Next question, Danny.
Thanks, Jerry. My name's Daniel. I hope I'm not taking it too far away, but I think it's somehow connected to the we anyway. As someone who doesn't directly work with the services, with people who are in services, I do offer some support for people who have been affected by the issues of homelessness. And I'm just wondering, as someone, maybe a layman, how we could get involved and why there's not a stronger message for those who are encountering people with problems on a day-to-day basis. And just another statement I was going to say on the back of that, I've seen Liverpool, we're commercially more successful than we ever were. How come without, is there any way that the commercial sector can get involved a little bit as well?
Thank you. That's a really good question. Again, would anybody like to take that? Provide an answer? Come on.
Oh, thanks. The easy answer is to say, actually, nobody chooses to be homeless, and actually ending homelessness has actually got to involve every single one of us, doesn't it? So the reality is, actually, support services, housing services, treatment services can't do it in isolation. It's actually got to be all of us. The question is how to involve all of us. And actually, one of the things that Housing First does is invest in people, doesn't it? It's about actually, as soon as you say you've got a right, and in this instance it's a right in terms of housing, as in it's not something that's earned, it's not something that you graduate towards, it's actually, no, fundamentally you've got a right to it. As soon as you put that in front of it, suddenly you actually start involving everybody. The question is how to actually harness it, isn't it? And I suppose that's your question that was about actually who's the we, how do we get the we? It's getting that message out there, getting everybody involved and actually making it happen. Haven't got the answer, by the way. I'm just saying, yes, it's got to.
I'm going to ask you, because that when we picked him up at the airport this morning, one of the questions I said, I want you to answer is, what can we do? That's Dan's question. So come on, you're on the foot. What can we do?
You can put the pressure on the local politics and local authorities. Yeah, that's the easy answer, but I agree with everything you said in your previous answer. You need to get the word out to people. When people know about the system, they want to get involved, they want to have the more information about it, and they are more willing to help and also more willing to accept Housing First tenants as their neighbors in the future, probably. But the main thing is to get the word out there. What is Housing First? Why we are doing it? How it's going to change the system in a way that we are hoping it's gonna change. And I think a good way to do that is that in Finland, the job that I'm doing, I'm coordinating the Housing First network. So we are including everybody who's interested about the homelessness work to the network. They are free to come to the training sessions. They are free to come to the seminars and conferences. So that way we connect people to the system that we are talking about and working about. And I think that the training sessions are a good example. They are free of charge. Anybody can come and join. And there's always a good mix of people. There are Housing First tenants, support workers, managers, housing providers. Sometimes there are even just normal guys from the street that are interested about homelessness altogether, and they want to come to share their opinions and learn more about the situation and the Housing First as a general way to do things. So I think that is one thing that you should consider.
Okay, thank you very much. I think Emma's next. I think for us it's important. We wanted to create this forum to precisely answer that. What can we do about this, about the homelessness? At least this is the very first time the general public have been told what Housing First is. Now, why haven't we been told that before? Why is nobody else? Why are we doing it when we're just a residents-led organisation that's not political, but we care about what's happening in our city, and homelessness is one of them. So the next question is from Emma, isn't it? Emma is from Choir with No Name, and we saw their fantastic video, and we're going to see it again at the very end.
Thank you very much. What lovely introduction. I'm just really curious, and forgive me if this is happening and I'm wrong, but every time we're talking about the we, and I get that there's a lot of in-depth kind of interactions that are going on there. Where are the strength-based community organisations in this? Because you talked about the strength-based approach. It sounds to me, and again, forgive me if I'm wrong, that the organisations that are being consulted, the organisations that are on the steering group, are all problem-based organisations, as in support services. Support services doing amazing jobs. But where are people like the choir, people like the football club, people who are working on a strength-based approach, building community, building communities to belong in, places to love, places where you can grow your own sense of pride and hope. If you're talking about people choosing whether to engage or not, that's where they choose to engage. So where are they in the consultancy? Because I've known of Housing First, but never been invited to anything. So that's my kind of call out today. Invite us. We know what we're doing and we can do these things really well with you.
Well said, well put. I'm not going to take that as a question because I think that's a really good statement and I want to leave that. That's really good. Thank you so much for that. Another question over here.
Hello, Mike Cunningham. I think Housing First is a brilliant initiative. I've had some chats with Kate in the past and heard a bit about it and had some family issues which I think would have been massively improved if Housing First had been around a couple of years ago. My question is we're kind of preaching to the converted in here because everybody's here because they've seen there's a homelessness seminar, evening, whatever. How do we take this out? And picking up on John Finnegan's point earlier, you know, how do you take it to the broader public who isn't sympathetic, who isn't here at 7 o'clock on a Thursday night in the rain? How do you explain it to someone who says, well, why are those alkies getting in first? Why are those druggies getting in first? Why are those da-da-da-da? You know, that's certainly not my opinion. I don't think it's the opinion of anyone in this room, but how do we take it out this room? And I'd like to ask you how he has done that, how in Finland, certainly in the early days, did they deal with the negative response and the counterproductive things that must have happened and will no doubt happen as this becomes a bigger project?
Excellent question. How do we deal with all the negativity that ordinary people have got?
Yeah, for sure. There was a lot of negativity in Finland as well, 2008 when we started. And I think that the main thing here is to really involve the neighborhood and the people to the work itself. So when you are housing people to the neighborhood, you, as a support workers, you should really do neighborhood work in a sense that you involve the tenants to the normal life that the building has. For example, if there's a barbecue party, you attend with your tenants there. You make sure that the neighborhood is ready in a way, so that you're not trying to hide that this apartment is for Housing First customer. That's not the way to do it, because the support worker is going to go there every now and then, probably more often than seldom. So be open about it, talk about it, have the seminars and training sessions for just ordinary people, because the training sessions, they don't have to be just for professionals and service users and local authorities. You can have training sessions just for normal people. Have a workshop, involve people there, engage them. In that way, you get the word out. They will tell the neighbors, oh, I was in this workshop and we were discussing about Housing First, and I think it was really cool and you should know about it too. That's one way to do it. And but I think the honesty is the key word. You have to be open for the people what Housing First is. It doesn't mean that you have to be addict to have a home. Home is just a basic right. And those who are who have the most complex problems in their lives, isn't that the best way to give them the home, probably the first? I think that if you go to a hospital, if you have a very bad wound on your neck, and if you have a limp on your knee, which one would you treat first? Just a question.
I think this is a really important point, but I think from my perspective, I think we've got a community that's come together in the city region area and identified street homelessness as an issue that it doesn't want to see and an issue that it wants us to resolve. So I actually think the community is on our side at this stage. I think it's important to recognise that this is a pilot, but it hasn't stopped or diverted any funding or any resources away from our existing homelessness services. So it's not that we're prioritising this or over anything else. It's just that this is an additionality that we're able to offer at this time. So it's not diverted away from other homelessness services that we've got. And that's been important to us about kind of like the messages that we've got. And also, you know, the sanctity of the local authorities' roles in terms of the administrators of our homelessness service as well. So we're very aware of all of that complexity. But I think we're in a good place. I think the community is on our side at this stage. I think that we need to be able to demonstrate lessons that work in housing first, in other aspects and other areas of where people come into the homelessness system. Because if we can make it work here, why can't we make it work for other elements of the service? And that's something that I will actually, be the vanguard for. And if there are simple lessons that we can take in from the test phase and roll it out, then it's absolutely important that we do that. So I think we're committed to all of that. I think we're in a good place, and we've just got to keep telling, for me, this isn't the bad people or people being encouraged to go and, stay on the streets to get a house. That's not how this housing first works. This is about understanding people's levels of trauma and the difficulty that they've had in their lives. And sometimes that takes extra special care and attention to help those people. And for me, that's the language that we've got to have. It's not about helping people who've perhaps, from the impairment of people who've caused this on themselves. People have been through horrendous trauma, I feel, to end up in those homelessness situations. And what this Housing First model is about is actually trying to rebuild their trust and rebuild their ability to engage back in. So I think that's why it's important. And I'd also say that I think we've actually there's been some here that, why don't we know about it? Well, I think as we can within a pilot model, we have actually been telling people what we're doing. And I know that, for example, in Sefton, we held an event, a big event, in which we asked all of the providers that work in the housing field and all of the communities to come and talk to us. And I'm sure that there's been different approaches in each of the local authorities to bring people on board. We're never perfect, but we haven't done this in secret.
Okay, I'm going to have the last question. There's a lady over here put her hand up before, so you got the last question or comment.
Cheers, hi. My name is Meryl. I don't belong to any organisation as per tonight. In fact, I'm just a member of the public. My background's construction. When I was listening to about what you were doing with it's not just new build, it's also refurbishment as well. Is it possible to bring the construction industries on board with a lot of these things? Say, can you give better not say man, girl hours, whatever. Can you bring them on board as part of the whole scenario of what's going on? And of course, apprenticeships, whereby if you had a building to refurbish, when I say building, it could be small scale, you could bring apprenticeships in, because you do have that finite 7.something or other million is only going to go so far, but there is so much. We've got Lango Rourke over the road, haven't we, trying to finish off our hospital. But the likes of, if we could bring those on board in a completely separate package and look towards, because that would bring it out to the wider community. It's a bit like DIY SOS on a bigger scale, But that's it anyway.
Very good point, Mara. We did hear from you, that that's already part of the situation in Finland. The construction industry is in at the beginning. But we've got Michael Burkett here from Regenda. Construction industry, and apprenticeships.
Yeah, thank you. So there is stuff happening around all of this. So in this room, we are blessed to have Sarah with us from the SIF framework. And what that does is work with construction partners in the city and takes a charge from them, which is then put back into social projects within the community. Sarah will explain a lot better than me afterwards, but my organisation as well also does lots of work within construction and takes 16-year-olds and puts them into loads and loads of different apprenticeship opportunities right across the city region. We need to do this in conjunction with Housing First. Once there's construction that comes out of the Housing First project, there's definitely something there. There's people like Sarah doing great stuff around it. My organisation is, but we mustn't lose what you say, because it's a brilliant point.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to wrap up. This isn't the end of the evening. I'm going to say a few words of thank you, and we've got the final video again to wrap up the evening of the Choir with No Name. And then we're all invited to just hang around in the bar, have a drink, chat to the people who are here. You're not going to be thrown out onto the streets in the rain at the moment, but you will be eventually. So first of all, just a big thank you tonight. First of all, to our sponsors, to Michael Beck, who's just been speaking, for the Regenda Group. Michael's the Group Chief Executive. To Promenade Estates and to Planet. I'd like to thank Steve McFarlane very much for enabling us to come here to the Fashion Hub, and also the people who run the Tapestry. For Nonconform, for the marketing and design support they've given us. And the catering is Bean Catering, which is a local enterprise that began on the waterfront a decade or more ago, and Engage, one of the first people in there, saw what they were doing and supported them, and the sandwiches are the best in the city. So if you can support Bean, please do. Bean Catering from Brunswick Park, Brunswick Business Park. Steve Webster, who's been videoing tonight, thank you very, very much indeed for your support. And for the Engage board, Alan and Mark, who've been helping us on the reception. To our panelists, to John, Nigel and David, thank you so much for what you're doing. And to our main speakers, to Tricia, Councillor Tricia Hardy, and to Juha Kahila. Our next seminar is taking place in a fortnight's time in the Baltic, in Constellations, in the Baltic Triangle. We've deliberately tried to take residents to perhaps places you may not have been to. How many people have been here into this building before tonight? Well, that's fantastic. 3, 4, 5. That means the vast majority here for the first time. That's exactly what Engage likes to do. We like to bring you to places that you would not otherwise. Now you've seen it, use it. Make the best of it and tell people about it. So we're going to come to the Constellations in the Baltic, maybe something which some of you haven't been to. It's Brexit day, night, it's Halloween. Please come along and help us to weep into a bucket or celebrate that it hasn't yet happened. Whatever you want to do, just come along and join us to look at the guy who's talking is one of the top people in the country who's the leading expert in European devolution and also in Brexit as a result. So he's going to, and he's the Scouser. He's going to be really good. So do come along and sign up. So thank you to everybody. Thank you to everybody here. Can I ask you a big round of applause for our speakers and panelists tonight?